Good afternoon. Welcome to Progressive Soup. My name is David Stevenson. I'll be today's host. With me, I have George Biglin, who will introduce himself in a moment. We're going to be talking about the opioid epidemic crisis, however it's defined. We know that there are a lot of folks in America that are dying every day from opioids. And of course, as usual, we're going to focus on not just the problem, but look at some potential solutions to help improve the situation for Americans with these horrible drugs. George?
Hello,
Thanks
David.
for joining me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Nice to be here.
Okay. Who are you, and what brought you to where you are in life?
Okay, I'm a licensed social worker in New York State. I've been a social worker for 43 years, but I've been in the field of treatment for 50 years. First 17 years of my career, I worked in residential treatment, working with violent and addicted teenagers. Mm-hmm. Then I went to corporate mental health, EAP field, and
Employee Assistance Program?
Employees Assistance Program in Wall Street for 3 years. And I've been in private practice for the rest of the time, the 31 years in private practice, both in Manhattan and up in Westchester, where my Westchester office is. I'm many different things which I do, but I have a fairly strong background and grasp of addiction, mm-hmm. Something which I've always been part of my, the way I look at things and I wanted to address. And when I worked in the Employees Assistance Program, I was exclusively the person in charge of working at the substance abuse issues of these high-end corporations where work hard, play hard. Mm-hmm. So I train addiction therapists in New York, both social workers and addiction counselors. I'm certified to do that by the state, and I do a lot of training in that field. Okay, so.
Okay, let's go to the crisis first. How do you define the situation that we're in now?
I'm going to read a couple of these things because it's somewhat staggering. Between 2000 and 2017, there has been 500,000 deaths related to overdosing on opioids. That's 91 people die in America each day
91
from
a day. That's staggering.
Staggering. It is staggering. The assessment is that there is 20.5 million people in this country that is struggling with substance abuse and addiction. Now, I'll differentiate that in a while. Mm-hmm. And there is 2 million people who are actively using heroin in an abusing and an addictive state at this particular time. You should know that we're 5% of the population, and we are responsible for 80% of the consumption of opiates in the world.
In the world?
In the world.
Ooh.
In the world. 5% of the population, mm-hmm. and we are responsible for 80% of the use of opiates. Now, I'm not just talking about heroin. I'm talking about pain pills and all the things that's the pharmacological companies have developed that we use. So it is really a difficult time, particularly when you look at the statistics that half of the young people who go on to inject themselves with heroin were using and abusing painkillers that they got in the medicine cabinet, mm-hmm. from their families, from pushers, from doctors, shopping different doctors, feigning illnesses and stuff like that, breaking into people's houses, breaking into people's pharmacies, all kinds of things. And 3/4 of I find this astounding. 3/4 of the newly developed heroin users have been abusing pain pills prior to that. So pain medication seems to be the gateway mm-hmm. drug at this particular point to further involvement in terms of opioids.
Why the transition? Why not just stick with the pain pills if they're readily accessible? Why not just stick with them rather than moving to heroin?
After a while, people catch up to it, and then their family gets involved in it, or somebody else is monitoring it, and it's harder to get. And the reality on the street, it's less expensive to get heroin than it is to get pain pills from the pharmacy.
Because that involves a doctor and
it's less expensive. Very inexpensive to get heroin. People say it's harder to get a pack of cigarettes than it is to get drugs in the country. That's what young people are saying.
Wow.
Okay. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the history of substances. As a species, there is a demarcation point from being hunter-gatherers to being civilized around 10,000 BC. That we start following the herds, and we grew wheat, and we stayed in one place, domesticated animals, and we then, when we weren't wandering around, we were able to kind of make things like civilization, pottery, stuff that we didn't have to carry around. Since that time, 8,000 BC until 2000, we have always been aware of what mead was, what poppies were, what coca was, what cannabis was, what mushrooms were, and we experimented with them. So it's always been there, and it's always been a driving force in our species that every so often we need to medicate either for just euphoria or to medicate psychological or physical pain.
Okay.
So it's always been there. 500 BC, people start making liquor and wine and beer. 5,000 BC, the Egyptians were making beer. So this stuff has been around for a long time. So let's fast forward to the revolutionary time in the United States. We'll focus on the United States.
Okay.
In the United States, revolutionary time, 15 to 18% of the population was really ruining their life with alcohol.
15 to 18%?
18%.
1 out of 5 almost?
With alcohol. There's always been a present, there's always been use, there's always been people who have always gone to the nth degree with this particular thing. That's just who we are. Now, let's fast forward from revolution to civil war. Morphine was invented, was synthesized, and was given to the soldiers when they were in pain. A lot of people became addicted to that. Right around that time, they find a way of making, out of the coca plant in Central America, cocaine. Then with the invention of the needle, these things can be injected right into the body. Yeah. So by the beginning of the 20th century, there was a problem with morphine addiction and cocaine addiction. Again, the alcohol was always present, has always been the present place in our country. And in 1910, a Bayer company invented heroin to help with addiction.
Oh, Bayer as in Bayer aspirin?
Right.
Okay.
Right. This was supposed to be the wonder drug to cure morphine and cocaine addiction, and it was not supposed to be addictive. Well,
is that why heroin has the name that it has? It's supposed to have been a hero, or the female version, heroin.
Yeah, this is
come to the aid of society.
It was touted as something that was going to cure morphine and cocaine addiction. And after a couple of years of that, they realized this is not working. The people that they're treating with heroin were even more pathetically abusing and dependent on it. And in 1914, they had this thing called the Harrison Act that it's illegal to do any of this stuff. And from that prohibition, the prohibition in 1914, the same thing. We have to stop the alcohol. We have to stop the drug taking. What prohibition did was that it funded the organized crime. And they had a lot of ways in which they brought alcohol into the country, and then it was repealed. And from the prohibition time up until the mid-50s, it was primarily alcohol. Small pockets of people were using perhaps marijuana, some coca, you know, some morphine, some, you know, heroin. They would find a way in which to do that. But for the most part, we have been a meat and potato country of being alcoholics. And in 1950, there was a big explosion, a la The Godfather, the whole thing about bringing opiates into the country. A lot of difficulties with that. Of course, the 60s came in, mid-60s, and pot, hallucinogens, the counterculture, sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Yeah.
You know,
we had a great conversation off camera about this before we came on camera, and I divulged that the audience pretty well knows that that I have a lot of folks on both sides of my family that died from alcohol and tobacco, and it kind of scared the crap out of me and helped keep me away from all that stuff. So their agony helped fuel save my own protection of myself from these things.
Let's just say I had my long-haired hippie freak kind of days.
I had everything but the long-haired and the hippie, but not the drugs.
So in some respects, during the 60s, it opened up. 70s, we're talking about cocaine. Cocaine was supposed to be user-friendly. You know, it was a pleasure drug. It just made you high. There was no addictive quality. 6 or 7 years of that, and it turned out it was very addictive. And then they brought crack, and then there was PCP, and the crack, PCP.
Yeah, angel dust.
All kinds of things were happening. Ecstasy, MDMA, all these drugs are coming in. The people who make these things find ways of getting it to us. They are very sophisticated in their techniques. So the drugs that are coming out with, both by the pharmaceutical companies and what they do synthetically themselves and get it, these drugs are amazingly powerful and amazingly efficient. Now, in 1999, after about, 70 years, 80 years of really being against the opioids for pain relief, the pharmaceutical companies were able to convince the powers that be that painkillers were non-addictive, almost like cigarettes are not addictive, you know, and it opened up an avenue in the use of opioids and other kinds of drugs to alleviate pain, which in theory is not a bad thing. People who are dying with cancer and chronic pain, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But you have to appreciate these things, the fact that these things are highly addictive. The longer you take it, the more tolerance you have. So when you look at substances, there is no use, there is intermittent or experimental use, there is regular use, there is abuse. Substance abuse is when you are taking something that is showing to you intermittently that it's bad for you. DWI, you're driving while intoxicated under substances, you get fired from your job, you lose your wife, your children aren't talking to you, but yet you still continue. You avoid, you deny what's happening to you, and you keep on pressing until, in fact, you are literally an addict. An addict means that unless you have a certain percentage of time, certain percentage of that drug in your body, you will begin to feel very unwell, which that means the necessity to actually take the drug in order to feel stable, somewhat normal.
So you get those withdrawal symptoms, where
right.
Physically your body directs you that you need to take these substances.
I have this interesting story. When I was a senior in college, I was the bartender at this bar, and all the people that were really very addicted to alcohol, we just talked about alcohol now, had to come into the bar, and there were 6 or 7 of these people, and one time I had a morning shift and I was 5 minutes late, and they were going to take my head off. But 6 or 7 of these guys came up to the bar, they ordered 4 to 6 double shots of vodka and orange juice.
This is in the morning or the evening?
In the morning. Because if they didn't have it in their body, they would not be able to function. Then lunchtime, they would then have to do it, and at nighttime that they would do it. That's what addiction is. And that's just with alcohol. Now, the preponderance of pain pills over the past 17 years has opened up a lot of kids abusing pain pills, which then goes on to heroin. And now you have the big thing in town is fentanyl, which is really like 10 times, 100 times stronger than heroin. And so whereas the alcoholic from no use to being addicted can take 25 years, 20 to 25 years.
That's for alcohol.
That was the standard, okay? Cocaine could be 18 months. Methamphetamine could be 9 months. Heroin could be 9 months. Fentanyl, you don't have much leeway. It is so powerful and it's so available, particularly for kids who are younger teenagers, that 2 years after puberty, when they are literally out of their mind. Yeah, they're out of their mind. They're integrating their sexuality.
Oh my God, we've all been there.
Where their sexuality, they're integrating anew who they are. Their family is an A, they have to be a B. No matter what the A, right or wrong, they have to be a B. They're no longer connected to their family, connected to their friends. During that time, children at that time, and this is the ones that I feel most concerned about, is that 14 to 16 thing. If children at that age do not need friends for parents. You need a parent who's going to maintain and keep an eye on this child and make sure that they're not going to hurt themselves. So that's where it is at this particular time. There's a lot of people hurting themselves. And these are not just children. These are also people who really have been, you know, again, our society is polymorphously addicted on many different levels. So you have...
What do you mean by that?
Okay. You have substance abuse and you have process addiction. Substances, coffee, cigarettes, food, alcohol, drugs, all kinds of things that you can use that will, and people aren't stupid. These things work. 1 minute you're feeling depressed, upset, confused, whatever. Three minutes later, in fact, you're feeling you're in a different country and the sun is out. Initially, they work, they make you feel better. That's substance abuse. On the other side, there is process addiction, gambling, spending,
shopping,
shopping, codependency. Now, this is one thing that we'll get into later. Codependency, that means that every day that you allow an active addict to live in your home and you are subsidizing them, every day that it occurs, that person that you love is getting sicker. Every day. Now, codependency is an addiction because the focus is on the other person. The other person, their difficulty, their problems, stuff like that. It's not on you. When you go to a place like Al-Anon, which deals with codependence and stuff like that, you say, keep the focus on yourself. So we as a culture, we have money, maybe not enough money, unless we're part of the 1%, but we have money to spend on all these different things, and we do things in order to alleviate our pain, okay? We work like heck, and then we play like heck, and we spend a lot of different things, both in the substance and the process, to avoid who we actually are.
You mentioned that you were working with folks, Wall Street level incomes, and you had talked a little bit about that off camera. This whole thing about when people work really hard, or in their own mind's eye, they're working really hard, or life in the fast lane. When they transit from work to play, it's the same thing.
To make a lot of money in Wall Street, you really have to do 80 to 90 hours of work per week. That's how it is. If you don't do that, they don't keep you on. Okay, you make a lot of money. But in order to do that, people are medicating themselves with all kinds of things. You know, recently I heard a story about a person who, very nice person, number of children. They were prescribed Adderall to deal with their attention deficit as a teenager. When they needed to be very much attentive to their work, they started getting Adderall, because the more you use it, the more tolerance that you develop. You need more Adderall to keep you focused on the do the 90 hour week. it gets tolerant, you need more and more. Because you need the job and you want to continue to make the money, you deny what in fact you're doing.
Yeah, so that's been prescribed more and more for adults. I mean, it started off as something almost exclusively for kids, and now, well, hey, now that the drug companies are telling us, well, you could need it as an adult too.
It's not just the drug companies. Although the drug companies have made billions and billions and billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars with all this opioids and all the things that they develop. And for a certain population, it is good. It helps people with their pain, helps people concentrate, it helps them get through and get better. And with other people, it makes them more and more hopelessly dependent.
You mentioned the end of life thing, where people are genuinely in a lot of pain, and it makes sense that at least it alleviates enough of the pain so you can lead closer to a functional life or a comfortable life. Well,
that was one of the reasons why the MDs were seduced by the pharmaceutical companies, because they could see their patients and they were really in need of pain relief. They were suffering from pain and do no harm. They tried to intervene and make these people feel better. But it has opened up the amount of dosages, billions and billions of dosages. Millions and millions of prescriptions a year. I think in 2002, it was 112 million prescriptions for painkillers. By 2012, it was 270 million prescriptions.
What are those numbers again?
112 in 2002 million prescriptions. To 270 million by 2012.
So almost double and a half.
Double and a half in terms of, and these are prescriptions. We're not even talking about illegal use. But the more people are using these painkillers, the more dependent they get, the more they're in denial. The extent of addiction is always followed by the extent of denial. So
one follows
a person
the other.
can be doing this, but in fact they're denial. So they don't see it as a problem. So we're awash with all kinds of drugs. Even before the painkillers came, we were awash even before that. The cocaine, the crack, the ecstasies, the PCP, all the different things that we've been doing for the past 30 years and 40 years and stuff like that. And now it's in a crisis at this particular time. Now, what do you do? Okay. Fortunately, there is a lot of protocol out there in order to do that. With adults, you have to know, as if you are a loved one of an adult, they probably know from seeing their past behavior that this is a problem. Now, if you can't get them into therapy...
So they're recognizing their... Whoa, hold on. Okay. This is a call from, not from Basil. Basil usually calls me about this time of the show. But this is a call actually from Trump Towers in New York City. Because as you know, Donald Trump, if you watch Basil, you know Donald Trump has 12 cats, all named Whitey. Simplicity. And they're telling me that Basil's going to come join them and teach them how to do a more efficient job of leaving offerings in Donald Trump's Gucci's. And I'll let you figure that out for yourself unless you want to watch the show. Friday night, 10 o'clock, and Sunday morning, the more religious show at 11 a.m. Okay, I hear you. Okay, enough. Whew. Continue.
Adults, again, there's individual and group psychotherapy. And then the 12-step community is a godsend. It saves tens of millions of people's lives. Has and will continue to do that.
That's excellent.
You're talking about AA, you're talking about CA, you're talking about NA, you're talking about OA, you're talking Gamblers Anonymous, all kinds of things. And the sister or brother groups to it are like Al-Anon, Nar-Anon, Gam-Anon. These are for the codependents, the people who...
Narcotics Anonymous?
Narcotics Anonymous. Okay. Yep. So these two things, okay, AA and Al-Anon, and then all the other ones and the sister group in terms of the loved one, the system has to be treated. oftentimes the codependent does not make interventions which are effective into changing the behavior with the adult. Now, adults are adults, okay, but you have individual, group, 12-step. Then next level is 3 days a week in partial rehab. Then there's detox, and then there's rehab, and there's long-term rehab. Depending on what you're dealing with, it will tell you that. It's out there. They might need more funding at this particular time, but the problem is here, but there's a lot of professionals out there that in fact can help you, and a lot of structures that are there that you can tap into, so it's there.
Okay.
With parents, with teenagers, we have to go back to this concept. When a child becomes a teenager, right after puberty, they literally, it's almost like parents say it's the invasion of the body snatchers. One day I have my child, the next day I have this complete enemy that hates me, you lie to me and stuff like that.
We call them teenagers.
Right.
But on drugs, with the drug it's
okay, but you have to say, that's the first stage.
Yeah.
That's breaking away, heating up and breaking away from the parents, from 14 to 16, the two years after. The next one is the middle stage. Now they're away from the parents, now they're experimenting. And then the last stage, in the late part of the teens, going into the thing, it starts cooling down. They start consolidating their individuality in that. So it's a system. But
okay, we're going to come back. We're going to come back and do another show tomorrow, Thursday, 12:30 in the afternoon. But we're going to continue the discussion now, and tomorrow we'll get on to more of the things that we, as family members, as professionals, can do to help alleviate this problem. Thank you for joining us. I'm David Stevenson, Progressive Soup, and we shall meet you here tomorrow at noon 30. Thanks for watching.